PMS, pregnancy, menopause. Being a woman is a lot. Ollie supports you and yours with expert solutions for every age and life stage. They just launched 2 new products exclusively at Walmart. Period Hero combats bloat, mood swings, and more during PMS. And Balance Perimeno to support hormonal balance, mood, and metabolism during perimenopause. Grab yours at Ollie.com.
Ollie!
These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Customizable, fast, easy. All words Carvana customers have used to describe buying and financing their car with Carvana. We want to make your car financing journey hassle-free. Carvana has thousands of affordable cars, transparent pricing, and customizable terms. We do everything in our power to give you the power to find, finance, and buy the perfect car. Go to Carvana.com to finance your car today. Terms may apply.
So, Marisa, Gavin Newsom is running for president, right?
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Marisa Lagos is a political correspondent at KQED in San Francisco. I called her up because I wanted someone to help me figure out what the California governor's deal is right now.
I mean, I think if you look back at his career, and I've been covering him since he was mayor 20 years ago, there's always been a sense that Gavin Newsom is setting himself up for a potential presidential run, that he has had his eyes on that site.
Was it the Vanity Fair photo spread that really sealed the deal?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because that continues to live rent-free in my head and will forever.
Me too. For the uninitiated, the photo shoot Marisa and I are alluding to is from more than 20 years back, and it was in Harper's Bazaar, not Vanity Fair. Newsom was mayor of San Francisco at the time. He had just made headlines for directing the city clerk to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. The article accompanying these photos, called Newsom and his then-wife, Kimberly Guilfoyle, the New Kennedys. And yes, Newsom's ex is also the ex-girlfriend of Donald Trump Jr. Yeah, I mean, we should just say, the pictures, they're really something. He and Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsom, I think, laid out on a rug at some point.
On a beautiful, Persian rug. She's in a floor-length gown. He's, I think, in a tux. They're sort of spooning. Google it. It's worth your time, even if you have no other interest in Gavin Newsom, I would say.
More recently, Gavin Newsom has been signaling his ambition in a new way.
This is Gavin Newsom.
With a podcast. Can you describe how that podcast launch went?
Controversial, I would say. The first guest he asked to come on was Charlie Kirk, the sort of right-wing provocateur.
Charlie Kirk. What the hell are you doing here? By the way,
I think on the left, people were just aghast that he would give a platform to folks like Charlie Kirk.
It wasn't just a platform, it was a friendly platform. He was like, "My son loves you, Charlie Kirk."
Literally last night, trying to put my son to bed. He's like, "No, Dad, what time? What time's Charlie going to be here?" And I'm like, "Dude, you're in school tomorrow. He's 13. He's like, "No."
Right, which raises all sorts of questions about screen time in Gavin Newsom's house. But that to me, the tone of it was what was so shocking. I mean, this is a man who sort of spoils for a lot of these kind of hard conversations with the right. And in this case, it was solicitous, it was agreeable, and he did not push back, even when Kirk was saying things that were factually untrue about Gavin Newsom's own record.
And then there was this bit.
So you right now should come out and be like, you know what? The young man who's about to win the state championship in the long jump in female sports, right. that shouldn't happen. You as the governor should step out say no.
No, and I appreciate
But would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. It is an issue of fairness.
So
it's deeply unfair.
Would you speak out against this?
The governor lets his guest badger him into saying that trans people playing sports is not fair.
What's not fair is just for entire woman's sports.
I agree. By the way, I agree with you.
So what is Gavin Newsom's deal?
I think what he is looking for more than anything is a sort of national reset. I gather that this might be an attempt to kind of paint his way out of the corner of being a California liberal. I'm not really sure who the audience would be for that. I don't think folks, on the MAGA right are going to ever support someone like Gavin Newsom. I suppose perhaps he could get some folks in the middle, but I don't know that they're the people who are going to be listening to Gavin Newsom's podcast on an off-election year.
Today on the show, what is Gavin Newsom up to? And is it working? I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
This episode is brought to you by Built. Built is perfect for those looking to earn airline miles and hotel points just by paying rent on time. There's no cost to join, and just by paying rent, you unlock flexible points that can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. When you pay rent through Built, you unlock two powerful benefits. First, you earn one of the industry's most valuable points on rent every month. Second, you gain access to exclusive neighborhood benefits in your city. Built's neighborhood benefits are things like extra points on dining out, complimentary post-workout shakes, free mats or towels at your favorite fitness studios, and unique experiences that only Built members can access. And when you're ready to travel, Built points can be converted to your favorite miles and hotel points around the world, meaning your rent can literally take you places. Start paying rent through Built and take advantage of your neighborhood benefits by going to joinbuilt.com/whatnext. That's joinbilt.com/whatnext. Make sure to use joinbuilt.com/whatnext to sign up for Built today.
So you mentioned you've covered Gavin Newsom for a long time. How would you explain how he's landed where he is now, like at the tippy top of the Democratic Party?
I think you can start, honestly, with aesthetics. The guy looks like a politician, right?
He looks like a Ken doll.
Yeah, well, he's got that sort of like Kennedy vibe. He's Irish Catholic. He, was raised in this interesting sort of mix of a world between being with a single mom who fostered kids and who I think really did struggle financially, to spending weekends and summers trips with his dad, who was very close with the Getty family, a storied, very wealthy San Francisco family. And so from when he entered politics, I think his first appointment was on the Parking and Traffic Commission. That was a Mayor Willie Brown special. He was always very ambitious. And I think that he has always had his eye on the next thing, the next prize. His election and his beating a recall have been relatively easy. And I think that, that speaks to the way that he's sort of been able to position himself in California politics.
I think most of my listeners will remember that Gavin Newsom rose to prominence as mayor of San Francisco, mostly because he allowed same-sex marriages to move forward. And I know you covered that moment in time. I think that for a lot of people, part of the reason why this podcast turn from Newsom has been so surprising is because of that history that they know. Like, Gavin Newsom fought for gay people to be able to get married. And yet at the same time, here he is, sort of yucking it up about trans athletes with a right-wing notable. But is there a disconnect here? Like, I'm wondering if you, as someone who's watched him over the years, does see this as a disconnect, or whether it actually just all fits together in some way for you.
I see a disconnect. I think he might argue that there's a connection in that he's sort of quote unquote, willing to stand up even to the people closest to him. And that certainly was the case in 2004 with gay marriage. You had people like Dianne Feinstein, one of his mentors, at the time, one of the most powerful politicians in San Francisco, warning against this just broadly for the Democratic Party, saying it was going to hurt them. And I think he did stand up for what he saw was right. And I think it was politically brave. I mean, that could have been the end of his political career, Is it brave in this moment then to be speaking against, trans kids in sports? I think a lot of people would argue no, that's sort of, punching down.
I like that point. That was actually doing something with his position as opposed to just saying something.
Talking, yeah. And I think that, at the end of the day, if he is going to lead on something, it's a lot braver to do something like that really has that impact and that he can show leadership with than by, again, going somewhere and just sort of agreeing with somebody who quite frankly has, said a lot of very hateful things about not just that constituency, but a lot of constituencies that Gavin Newsom has purported to defend his entire career.
Newsom was governor the last time Trump was in office as president, right?
Yes.
How did he approach the Trump administration then? And how does it look different than he has this time?
I mean, in 2017, Newsom really was the leader of the resistance, or one of them. I mean, he came out swinging very hard. This time around, like the entire party, but I think even more marked for Newsom, it's been very different. When Trump came into office, Los Angeles was on fire. The state was grappling with one of its, worst urban disasters in history.
So Newsom needed Trump.
Yeah. And so I think, rightfully, you could argue Newsom really sort of walked a very fine line of not wanting to alienate Trump. When Trump comes to the state, he, greeted him on the tarmac. When Trump came to visit LA, he has definitely been sort of careful about some ways that he is critical of the president. And for example, when he rolled out his budget recently, he was railing against tariffs. He spent like the top 30 minutes of the news conference talking about how that was affecting the economy and caused this budget deficit. And then when he was asked, so are you blaming Trump? Newsom said, no, I'm not blaming Trump. It's like, how are we supposed to read that? So, yeah, I think he in particular, but many Democrats are trying to figure out how to push back to what feels like a stronger, sort of more organized Trump administration. And I think Newsom has been maybe the best example of that almost confusion and just, they're in the wilderness. They're trying to figure out what to do. And I don't think he's any different.
Yeah. I mean, it struck me that some have focused in on policy announcements from Gavin Newsom and looked at those as sort of indications of a kind of shift in tone from him. And I want to talk about a couple of those policy moves because I'm not sure they do completely show a shift in tone from him. Like there's been a lot of attention to the fact that Gavin Newsom has said he wants local communities to start to push to get rid of homeless encampments. And, this is something many local communities have resisted. Some people have concerns that just trying to shut down encampments is cruel. But I saw this and I thought, Gavin Newsom has never really liked a homeless encampment. He filed an amicus brief with the Supreme Court, basically being like, we need you guys to look at this and give us a shot to get rid of these homeless encampments. He doesn't like the disorder, and he's kind of always been like that. But I'm wondering if you see this as a shift.
I don't see it as a huge shift. I mean, homelessness, to your point, has been an issue that he's struggled with and tried to really tackle aggressively since he was mayor. At the time, he got a lot of blowback for initiating a program that a lot of, people on the left, a lot of progressives in San Francisco saw as very overly aggressive. I mean, it was called Care Not Cash. And essentially he told people on the streets, like, you are not going to get your welfare payments directly. You're going to have to engage in services if you want this money.
It sounds very Republican, actually.
Right. I think what he and a lot of other people in the Democratic Party here would say is that it's not progressive to let people sleep and die outside, right? And that they're trying to get their arms around a problem that has been really difficult to solve. So I don't think you can view the way he's positioning himself as either inconsistent with really the way he's approached this problem his whole career, or only focused on the politics. Things can be sometimes good policy and good politics at the same time. And I believe that's probably what he's betting on right here. Because if you look at polling, it is not as if homelessness is a left-right issue, right? People want this solved. They do not want encampments in their neighborhoods. And they feel like the state needs to step up and do something, especially given the amount of money we spend.
Yeah. There's another move that struck me from Gavin Newsom in the last few weeks. He announced he wants to roll back medical coverage for undocumented people. And this did seem like a big change to me because, California proudly said it was going to move forward with health insurance for the undocumented when the program launched. Then it got very, very expensive. So this, Republicans are kind of crowing this is like a comeuppance for someone like Newsom. How do you see it?
I think this one's a little more complicated. I certainly think if Trump was not in the White House, if there were a President Kamala Harris, that the budget were similarly hurting and he had proposed this, we would not be talking about it on this podcast.
Huh. I think what you're saying is there's so much performative cruelty from the Trump administration right now that it creates this space where if you're a Democratic leader, the instinct is to do the opposite of that. And this seems like not the opposite of that. And so therefore, we're all like, what's going on?
Yeah, I think that there's an expectation that folks on in the Democratic side are going to sort of dig in and protect undocumented immigrants. But I think that, similar to the trans issue, there's a lot of people kind of looking over their shoulder going, wait, did we miscalculate? Are we on the wrong side of things? And so it makes it difficult. I mean, look, if you look at the details of what Newsom has proposed, it's kind of, I think, trying to have your cake and eat it too, because what he's saying is, okay, we overpromised, we got to, sort of reel this back in. But the way they want to do it is stop enrolling people come next January. So that's a pretty long runway. Create a copay for adults who are undocumented in 2027. That's when he's out of office. They're not proposing to cut off aid to kids, for example. This was not a full-throated sort of, walking away from this policy. It's sort of nibbling around the edges.
But I guess it seems to me that if you're a Democratic politician right now, it would be very easy to say something like, listen, our state budget is just going to get slammed because of everything that's happening in Washington. And frankly, we are getting a ton of pressure to reduce aid to this population. And I have to make some adjustments here. And my hand is really being forced. And I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it this way. And, the children will still be covered. And those aren't the headlines I'm seeing.
Yeah, but in a way, maybe that's what he wants. Maybe he wants that headline as a virtue signal to somebody in another state. But at the same time, he can turn around at home and say, you didn't lose your health care. Potentially, I don't know for sure, but I would guess potentially Newsom was okay with the way that this played because it kind of gave him a little bit of credibility on both sides.
But it's funny, when you say that, I think, oh, that's one of Gavin Newsom's problems. He seems like a politician without an ethos.
I think that is his biggest problem. If you look at a recent poll that really found that most Californians, even Democrats who have supported him, feel like he's more operating with an eye toward his political future than what's best for the state. And so I think this is something that's dogged him. There's the benefit of looking the way he does and seem like a natural politician. There's also the sort of double-edged sword of that a lot of people see you as a natural politician, and people don't really like politicians. And they don't like people that they think are acting with their political sort of survival in mind. And I think Newsom has always had that kind of problem politically.
After the break, Gavin Newsom's wonky tendencies, his big Biden problem, and whether he's got an actual shot.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today? Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. And that's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you can save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states and situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Not everyone is careful with your personal information, which might explain why there's a victim of identity theft every 5 seconds in the US. Fortunately, there's LifeLock. LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats to your identity. If your identity is stolen, a US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year by visiting lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Hi, this is Joe from Vanta. In today's digital world, compliance regulations are changing constantly, and earning customer trust has never mattered more. Vanta helps companies get compliant fast and stay secure with the most advanced AI, automation, and continuous monitoring out there. So whether you're a startup going for your first SOC 2 or ISO 27001, or a growing enterprise managing vendor risk, Vanta makes it quick, easy, and scalable. And I'm not just saying that because I work here. Get started at vanta.com.
Marisa says one thing people outside of California might not realize about Gavin Newsom is that he is a bona fide technocrat, a guy who loves to get in the weeds of policies big and small.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who, when he was mayor, came in. I was at the San Francisco Chronicle at the time. At the end of his terms, as he was preparing to become lieutenant governor, came in with multiple three-wing binders just stuffed with papers, which he told us were his matrix of accountability. And he wanted to go through page by page everything he had promised since he ran for mayor and what had happened in each area. And we had to cut him off eventually after a couple hours.
A couple hours?
Yeah. Like, this was supposed to be an hour-long meeting, and well into hour 2, I think the head of the ed board was like, okay, we have some questions, Mr. Mayor. He is deeply in the weeds on things he cares about. You know, he's dyslexic, so I think the way he learns and retains information is very different than the way maybe some people do. He can rattle off numbers, and if you fact check them, like, they're right. Really, yeah, in the weeds on policy areas.
I feel like you can hear this a little bit in his podcast. Like, I was listening to it, and he loves the word stress testing. He uses it all the time.
Yes.
And his podcast has this weird feeling of like being at the water cooler at McKinsey, the consulting firm.
Totally.
Like, all of the press around the podcast was like, he's trying to communicate with men and like get down with dudes. And I listened to it, I was like, but this is a really specific kind of dude. Like, this is not the dudes you're looking for kind of thing.
I think McKinsey is a good example. Like, that is definitely who he would sort of, I think, naturally like hang out with, or like those kinds of bros.
You could hear it in the interview with Steve Bannon.
Yes.
Like, he almost gets run over in that interview. Like, Bannon literally says, I've come here to change your mind. Like, I'm here to like win a fight with you. And Gavin Newsom says like nothing. I think partially because Bannon really plays to Newsom's technocratic preferences. Like, he's just like, here's this fact and the other fact and blah, blah, blah. And then when he says stuff that's kind of troubling, like at some point, Steve Bannon jokingly refers to Elizabeth Warren but doesn't use her name. He just calls her Pocahontas. Newsom says nothing.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, you can't do that. If you want to be a leader in the Democratic Party, you got to like be like, I'm sorry, we don't do that here.
Well, that's, I think, the biggest critique. And also what's puzzling about that podcast, like I said before, is that he likes to spar. He likes to push back on people, and he's smart enough to do it in real time. I mean, if you watch one of his news conferences with reporters, you can see this, right? And so the fact that he's being so deferential to someone like Bannon or Charlie Kirk, I think, is a little puzzling to those of us who have watched him. So he's got layers, Mary. He's got layers for sure.
Another problem that I think Gavin Newsom will face if he does launch a national campaign is that he was a massive Joe Biden stan.
Yes.
Like, he was at the debate where Joe Biden flopped. He was saying Joe Biden won that debate in the aftermath. He went to a White House meeting where, if you read Jake Tapper's new book, like, other people were questioning Joe Biden and really like trying to get answers out of him. And reportedly Gavin Newsom was rah-rahing, is how they describe it. Has he dealt with that at all?
No.
Really?
I don't think so. I mean, yeah, he really went hard for Biden. He continued to. I think that this is something that will be a huge question for Newsom.
Yeah, it's funny because especially for a guy who literally launched a podcast in January or February, where he's like, we got to get back and talk to people because we lost this election, to show no reflection on his own role in that election, Seems like a miss.
Yeah. And those were the conversations I thought might be happening on that podcast, right? But that's not what's happened. It's very much sort of glossing over all of that and kind of almost wanting to act as if it didn't happen.
Okay, so we've really explored Gavin Newsom's trouble spots. But I do think the one of the many reasons, we can't sort of say, oh, well, nothing is going to happen in 2028 with this guy, is because he's proved so durable in the past. He literally survived a recall election not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think he's learned from experiences like that might now be informing how he's thinking about whatever his next step is?
I don't know if the recall is the best sort of learning experience for Newsom. I mean, California is such a different state. We have everything nationally that you would have in a national race. You have deep red areas, you have rural, you have urban, you have mountains, you have desert. But the registration here is just so heavily Democratic that it's a fully different conversation if you're running statewide here than if you're running nationally. So I think this is why we're seeing him a little lost right now, perhaps with this podcast and kind of grasping to see where he goes next, because it would be such a different calculation to run nationally. And even if you've spent so much time, on cable news kind of preparing for that moment, it's going to look really different when you're actually campaigning, in primaries and things like that. I don't know that I fully understand yet which lane he would try to occupy in a national race.
That's interesting, because it really just it says so much about the fact that Gavin Newsom can shapeshift a little bit. If you've covered this guy for 2 decades and you're like, I don't know exactly who he'd choose to be as a national candidate.
Yeah, I think he can. I think he in some ways has that privilege as a tall, handsome white dude who has sort of, played on the left edge of some policy areas, but then has also had to govern, at times more from center left. But I think also this speaks back to the sort of lostness of the Democratic Party. It's hard to know what lane you would run in if you don't even know what who else is going to be running and what the landscape is going to look like. And I think there's also still just a lot of trying to figure out what is the right message on things that Trump really dominated on last time around, like immigration. These are issues that I think Democrats are trying to sort out, how do they talk about them in a way where they can win back voters, but also not abandon their values. And I think nobody better sort of exemplifies that struggle in some ways than Newsom.
How do you think you're going to know that Newsom's made his choice, that he's entering the race or not?
I don't think anything will be definitive, because I think what we've seen in the past is he's always sort of setting himself up for the next run. And I think he'll do everything he can to do that, whether or not he's decided 100% if he's going to run.
Do you think he's got a shot?
I don't know. I find it hard to believe that there's a lane for a California Democrat, but never say never. Politics feels very unpredictable these days. And I would hate to count him out entirely. I think in some ways the folks in California are more skeptical of his national aspirations than people nationally are, even though people nationally seem to dislike him more. I think there's a lot of skepticism here that the rest of the country wants a Californian in the White House.
Marisa, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Marisa Lagos is a political correspondent for KQED Public Radio in San Francisco. She's also the co-host of the podcast Political Breakdown. Go check it out. And that is our show for today. But you know what? If you want more of What Next to Love, you should really be subscribing to Slate Plus, because we are putting out these bonus conversations about everything from Jeff Bezos's all-female astronaut crew to Congress's big, beautiful bill. You can hear me and my friends from all over the Slate newsroom, totally unfiltered. People like Jim Newell, Slate's Washington correspondent, who dropped this true gem about the GOP's latest reconciliation bill.
I think the final vote was 215 to 214. Well, one Republican we know, Andrew Garbarino from New York, missed the vote because he fell asleep. So They could have woken him up if they needed him.
If you are in Apple, the way to hear this conversation is to click Try Free. You'll get access right away. Or you can head over to slate.com/whatnextplus and do it there. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Ethan Oberman, Isabel, Angell, and Madeline Ducharme. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.